So welcome to our Spotlight on the Standards third grade training. And we're just waiting for a few more people to enter. While they're doing that, if you wanted to go ahead and type in the chat where you teach, where you're from. It's always interesting to see how many different counties we have represented here in our trainings. One of the benefits to going online with Zoom is we get to reach out to different parts of our state. Excellent.
Okay, Birdie, nice to see you. Vale, wonderful. Gilbert, that's where I started teaching way long time ago. Oh, Islands Elementary, that's where my real kids went to school.
Oh.
Yes, Islands
Okay.
Dolphins. In fact, they were both home and singing the Islands Dolphins song the other weekend. It was kind of funny.
Excellent.
Welcome, everyone.
We're going to go ahead and start because we have a jam-packed session today. And my name is Tammy Waller, and I'm the Director for K-12 Social Studies and World and Native Languages at the Department of Education. And I'll have Linda introduce herself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Linda Burrows, and I am the K-12 Social Studies and World and Native Languages Specialist here at the Department of Education. Thanks for coming today.
Absolutely. And later on, we will have Heather join us. And here's Heather. She's going to introduce herself.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Heather Mall. I'm the co-coordinator of the Arizona Geographic Alliance.
Great. And at the very end of the training, you'll meet Jordan from the State Capitol Museum. And she has a bunch of really great resources to share with you on teaching third grade using the State Museum. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. And let's go ahead and I don't have Linda has control of the PowerPoint. Excellent. So we're really excited that you're here today. We do understand that one of the grade levels that had the most significant change was third grade in our new standards adoption. And as a result of that, Linda and I have really wanted to do these trainings to be able to connect you to some great resources. And our hope is by the time you leave this training, you'll not only have some great resources and ideas, but you'll feel less anxious or nervous about teaching the new standards in third grade. So our agenda today is to review the third grade Arizona social science and history standards, to explain how to use those standards, to examine inquiry and how to use primary and secondary sources in your classroom, and then also examine how to leverage ELA and social studies together to meet your literacy standards, because we know that third grade is a really essential year in terms of literacy. That is the year where students take their state test for the first time, and it's the year of move on when reading. So Linda and I know how important it is for those literacy requirements to be met. And we also know that the research shows, I'm going to be talking about that in just a few minutes, that one of the best ways to meet those literacy standards is actually to use really rich, deep social studies content. So we're going to give you a little poll to start out, and the poll is on your knowledge of the standards. So one is, I know the standards well. Number two is, I'm comfortable with the standards. Number three is, I can't see. I know them a little. And number four is, I don't know the new standards. So go ahead and are we launching a poll, Linda?
You know what? The polls got deleted all of it for some reason. So let's just have people type it into the chat for us.
Okay, so into the chat. Great. So, all right. It seems like we have a few fours. We have a lot of threes, some twos. This is good. This is good. Lots of twos and threes, a few fours and a few ones. Excellent. So Linda and I and Heather's goal for today is that you move up a little bit in terms of your knowledge and comfort with the standards. So if you don't know the standards at all, that's okay. When you leave today, we hope you know them a little bit better and are a little more comfortable. If you're comfortable with them, we hope that you have more knowledge and understanding with them. So we're going to go ahead and We got some Zoom craziness going on.
Yeah, sorry.
It's okay. We're gonna go ahead and move to the next slide. So our learning goals for today are to become familiar with the third grade 2018 history and social science standards, examine the major shifts in the standards and how they'll affect curriculum and instruction. We'll have you participate in some model lessons and then examine lots of resources and even continuous training that's available to you at no cost throughout the year. So we're going to start out with this idea of marginalization of social studies. So the CCSSO, which is the Council of Chief State School Officers, is where all the superintendents of public instruction get together and meet. They have a group for social studies educators and district and state leaders. And several years ago, they did a lot of research on this idea of social studies marginalization and where social studies fits in terms of instructional time and how that's changed since No Child Left Behind. So in the chat, take a peek at this marginalization of social studies infographic. It has lots of interesting information on it. I'll give you a minute or two to look at it and then type one thing in the chat that made an impact on you as you read it. And when we send out the presentation, you'll get we have a link to the chart. So I know some people said it was a little fuzzy to them. You'll be able to look at it a little bit more deeply. Okay, so I see a lot of things in the chat. Focusing maybe on that reduced time in social studies, it does receive the least amount of core time of all the core elementary subjects. I see that that idea of reading comprehension, which is the right side of the chart, is really focused on how social studies content, knowledge, and teaching social studies has an impact, significant impact on reading achievement. And then we've had some people have looked at the left side of the chart, which really looks at this idea of less time on social studies means less opportunities in terms of civic engagement and impacting our schools, maybe where students tend to have lower reading scores anyway. Social studies is taken away even more. So we're going to go ahead and examine some different parts of this. But the reason that Linda and I bring this up is we know that you guys are under a lot of pressure in elementary, especially third grade, to focus all of your attention on those non-AZ merit, because we don't have the AZ merit anymore. I know it's a new test, but coming up, I think it's AZ merit too. But to really reduce that time, and I have siblings who teach elementary school who have been told by their administrators to cut things or not to do some of their social studies time. But we're here to really talk to you about really advocating to make sure that that time is still there and that it has lots of benefits, but especially benefits as students are taking those standardized reading tests. And some of the things that really have come out is this idea that poor readers with strong background knowledge display better reading comprehension than strong readers with low background knowledge. And this was the Daniel Willingham study on baseball, where students with a strong background knowledge of baseball outscored, it's okay, you can go on to the next one, outscored their peers who were higher readers but had no knowledge of baseball. So that content and background knowledge is very important, because a lot of the exam questions on these standardized tests, they have to give informational text about something. Many times it's informational text about social studies. So let's go on to the next slide. So we've been spending more and more time giving time to ELA, but our state and national reading scores have stagnated, they've flatlined, and in some cases are even starting to decrease a little bit. And that's what caused a lot of research into why that's happening. Districts are spending a lot of money, teachers are spending a lot of time with interventions and programs and more time with the ELA block, yet we see a stagnation in 4th and 8th grade. And what researchers have determined and learned, it has to do with the fact that these areas have stagnated as we've begun to narrow the curriculum and pushed out time on science, social studies, arts, and other areas. Next slide. So there's been a lot of really good research, and there was actually a brand new study, and all of this is linked in the presentation that you'll get. And basically it all says that social studies is critical to literacy success. And the studies that were in the infographic were the Willingham study, which talked about background knowledge and how do you get background knowledge. A great way to do that is through social studies, reading and writing about social studies. The Leslie and Recht information, which is where students in 2nd grade who were given literacy-rich social studies lessons had that significant increase in their state testing and reading. And then Natalie Wexler just published a book called The Knowledge Gap, which talks about the fact that students don't have the background knowledge to answer these questions. They might be able to read the words, but they don't understand the context behind them, which is essential. One of the studies we'll look at in a minute just came out this last year by Fordham, which is an organization that has looked at the impact of time on different subjects and increase in literacy scores. And they find that the only increase time subject that when you increase the time, you get a significant increase in reading scores is social studies. And then Nell Duke. And Nell Duke is a literacy specialist, and she is out of the University of Michigan. And she has looked at the fact that that kids get to 4th grade with the ability to read words, but they don't have knowledge necessary to comprehend. And that background knowledge is what authors assume they would have. And she's talking about authors who also write testing questions for companies. And we linked to a really great video that we don't have time to show, which really talks about her research and gains that students make when you use rich content knowledge in areas like science and social studies to have students read those rich types of texts and work with those. So I encourage you to look at Nell Duke's research. She's really engaging, and she gives some really good ideas for how to infuse. So I just want to talk about the Fordham study. This was a study that just came out this year, and it's receiving a lot of attention. And it is one of the first studies that really looked at time on subjects. And it talks about how more instructional time devoted to social studies correlates with greater reading growth from 1st through 5th grade. And if you look at the graphic, it looks at each subject and what percent of test score improvement for 30 additional minutes of daily instruction in these areas. And, ELA, increased ELA instruction time, you're not getting much bang for your buck. Math is a little bit more. Non-core subjects, about the same as ELA. Science, there was actually in the study a little decrease, but social studies at 15% was the only statistically significant increase of 30 minutes of daily instruction and content actually increased literacy scores. And some of the big ideas from this study, and it's linked in the presentation, is we know that elementary students in the US spend more time on ELA than anything else. Students from less affluent backgrounds, Hispanic students, and those attending public schools spend more classroom time on ELA than other students. Increased instructional time in social studies, not ELA, is associated with improved reading ability, and students who benefit the most from additional social studies time are girls, those from lower income and non-English speaking homes, which are all areas which we are looking at to really get their comprehension and their achievement in reading up. So there's one last bit of research, Timothy Shanahan, and one of the things Timothy Shanahan talks about is that, what students read matters. So if you're going to have students read, then pick something content rich. And Linda and I would say social studies rich in order for students to read it. Set reading goals. Read multiple texts on a topic so students understand perspective. Context is a must, developing context with students, and reading does that, but also developing context to what students read. We're going to give you some ideas later about how you can use primary sources and pair them with literacy or literature and books that you might be reading in class to connect. He advocates for breaking up the reading block and infusing rich texts from other content areas, and to write often in all areas. So we're going to move on in just a second, and we're going to talk a little bit about the standards. But before that, just what we really want to emphasize is the idea that social studies isn't an add-on. Social studies is an integral part of the core subjects, and there's some really great things that we're going to share with you that really braid ELA and social studies together well and help students in many different ways. And I'm going to turn it over to Linda.
Thank you. So when we were thinking of all this research that we've been looking at and going through it, we know we want kids to be career and college ready. And so the idea of what kind of skills do they need? What kind of skills do they need when they think about life and their problems that they're going through? What kind of reading skills do they need? And then also what kind of communication skills do they need? And we have a Jamboard here that I'm gonna click us out to. That's just gonna take just a minute here. Oh, there we go. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Let me make this bigger here so we can all see it. I'll put this into the chat for everyone. And if you haven't used Jamboard before, it's kind of a fun way to look at things. So when you get in here, you'll see as you log in, there are different pages up at the top. So we're going to start on the first page. And what you do over here on the left-hand side is a toolbar. And the fourth one down is a sticky note. And so what I'd like for you to do is to click on the sticky note and it brings it up here. You can adjust the colors if you haven't seen this before. But think what skills, what are the types of things that we want kids to be able to do when they graduate from high school that will make them really successful both in college, but also career too, because college isn't necessarily for everyone. So for example, we want students to be able to read and make inferences, right? And I believe I'm spelling that correctly. And you just click save, and then you can come up here and you can move them around. Let me see, here's mine. Since it's reading, I'm going to pull it over here. So we're going to give you just a minute to participate in that and fill it up as we go through. Oh, I like reading complex texts. Oh, I love the seeing things from a different perspective. That's a great one too. Making connections, fantastic. Pulling from background knowledge, wonderful. Decision making, teamwork, that's really big. Self-management. Oh, evaluate bias, that's a wonderful one. Collaboration, working well with others. I've got some great ones. Oh, identifying motives, time management, reading endurance. Oh, these are all fantastic. Oh, building vocabulary, perfect. Wonderful, collaborate with others, sharing ideas, compromise. Oh, great one. Awesome. Learning about our world. Oh, these are so fantastic. You guys have got it. When we wrote the standards, we did write them with this idea of what do we want the end outcome to be? And that's really when we think of the standards and how they go forward, what exactly are they looking like? All right, I'm just gonna let you finish that up. Looks like pretty much everyone's got something on there. All right, so I'm gonna make this not so big anymore so we can see the slide. Let's see. All right, wonderful. We'll come back to that Jamboard actually a little bit later and show you a different way of doing things. So just like what you guys came up with just now, this is exactly what we did when we wrote the standards a few years ago. You know, we want students to think analytically by posing and framing those questions. We want them to be able to gather evidence, create and look at change and continuity over time, looking at cause and effect, and again, those inferences from a variety of subjects. As students read, we want them to read critically and widely, right? We want them to examine, interpret, contextualize items from primary and secondary sources, identifying and comparing sources, looking at secondary sources for that kind of corroboration, and then discerning subtext, right? That's kind of whoever said like pulling from the context in that background. That's what we want to see. And then lastly, when kids communicate, we want them to be able to communicate cogently and compelling. We want them to be able to express their ideas, but to make that argument and have it make sense. And so using evidence-based arguments, looking at multiple perspectives, bringing in diverse types of writing and having constructive conversations is something that we really want kids to be able to do. So our new standards going forward, there are two Sam Weinberg quotes, which Sam Weinberg is a professor at Stanford University, and he's written a bunch of books, and he does a group called the Stanford History Education Group, which has come out with some great middle and high school stuff. But his quotes really apply to what our standards are. And our standards really fit this first one that say, our job is not to give kids the answers, but our job is to give them the problems to solve and then the tools they need to solve them. And he wrote that in a book called Why Learn History When It's Already on Your Phone, which is true, right? The kids can look up anything they want, but that doesn't give them those skills necessary to really solve the problems that they need to in their lives. So getting to our shifts and changes with the standards, some big shifts are that we do now have a progression, right? When my kids were little and in elementary school, the social studies was all over the place. It was this hodgepodge in elementary school, where third grade, maybe they were learning about, you know, communities, and then fourth grade, they were learning Arizona, and then they went to Mesopotamia, and it was all over the place. And if they happened to have a teacher that loved ancient Egypt, hey, we're learning about Egypt. And so there really wasn't any clear progression, where now we have a progression from when we have those little kiddos in kindergarten, as their views of the world get bigger, then so does their content knowledge. And that goes and builds upon each grade level. We also have anchor standards, which Tammy's going to talk about a little bit later, but these are like these main overarching ideas that we want kids to have at the end of high school mastered, but they do get grade specific pieces of it in elementary school. And then inquiry, which you've heard, is just a big part of our standards. And we're going to show you some great inquiry lessons and how to incorporate those with both ELA and social studies, and even bringing in science and things like that. And then also the skill complexity increases. And then the last big shift and change, which you can see, the most of the ones on the top here are really dealing with third grade, where we've got, regardless of whether you're learning history in a world setting or US setting, it's the same kind of standards. Economics is also now required to be taught in elementary school, which I know gives people a little bit of a pause, because most teachers don't take an economics course. So how am I supposed to teach economics? That being said, there are fantastic resources out there for grade specific stuff for economics, which we will show you about. We also, in order to get that progression, so it was clearly building year from year, we had to move Arizona studies from fourth grade to third grade. And then to alleviate this huge chunk in fifth grade, we moved some of that content into fourth grade. again, making sure that it is going further and again, building upon each thing. So now I'm going to turn it over to Tammy to talk about the structure of the standards.
Great. So we also changed our standard structure. In the past, we had this, they weren't actually even standards for social studies because they didn't increase in complexity from grade to grade. They really were just a list of POs, which highlighted people, places, events, and they really didn't have any type of organization or structure. So another Sam Weinberg quote that really applies to our idea, where we shifted from just these POs that it was like a drive-by, one and done. You learned about it, and then maybe in a few years you might have this, a similar type of PO. We wanted to develop a system of anchor standards because the mind demands pattern and form, which builds up slowly and requires repeated passes, with each pass going deeper and probing further, which is why we set up these sets of anchor standards that in every single grade band, not every grade, but every grade band, students learn and work with each of those anchor standards and apply them to the course specific content. So for third grade, it would be Arizona. So when I think about it, our old standards looked like my daughter's closet, just a big pile of laundry. And you really had to like pull through it and try and find things, and it was very unorganized. But the new standards are how I wish her closet looked, and it's where things are organized and they have a sequence to them that makes sense. And that's how when we brought the standards committees together, one of the things they talked about, especially at elementary, was it just made no sense, and they wanted to see some sort of coherency with the standards. So let's look at the standards. What are they? So our standards are focused on the idea of inquiry and questions, having students uncover history, geography, economics, and civics, as opposed to being told or fed information. They're now developing it through questions. It's broad. It allows a lot of flexibility at the local level. So you can use the standard, and you can use many different examples of content to meet that standard, looking at your students, your class, the interests that are there. And it shows a progression of skills K-12, especially the skills and process standards, where we're teaching students about change and continuity over time. It progresses the idea of looking at multiple perspectives, the idea of creating arguments and supporting evidence, and then communicating those claims. They're not a checklist to memorize. They're not inflexible, and they're not just standalones where you just do it and then you move on to something else. Everything builds. Okay. So let's look at the standards. So when you look at your grade level standards, the first thing you have is something called course considerations, and or we call them storylines for K-8. And it's basically what overall can your course content cover? And it's kind of, it has a set of bullets, and they're not super specific. They're more general, so you can pick examples that support those bullets. So that gives you the what students are going to teach or learn, the what. So then we have disciplinary skills and processes. Those are the skills necessary to do all of those things that you guys wrote on the Jamboard, and to start them from kindergarten and work through 12th grade. So we've got disciplinary skills and processes. We've got civics content standards, economics content standards, history content standards, and geography content standards. And those content standards are very skills-based. They are what and how students will learn. So we're blending the what and the how together. And these are our anchor standards. And we have 5 different categories. We have those disciplinary skills and processes, civics, economics, geography, and history. And most anchor standards, there's 4 standards. And those are the 4 standards, and your content standards fit under one of those 4 standards under each category. The only exception is economics, which has its own personal finance strand. So as you can tell, these are what students by the end of 12th grade will be doing. So we're going to spiral those ideas up. And then we have the storylines or the content focus. And you guys know that your Arizona studies now, before you, 2nd grade did the world and me, communities was 1st grade, and children as citizens was kindergarten. And then after 3rd grade in the progression, we moved from Arizona to the region and cultures of the Americas, pre-contact to European settlement. In 5th grade, we pick up with the effects of that European settlement, looking at the revolutionary period through industrialism. 6th grade goes to global studies, looking at world regions and cultures. 7th grade is an integrated global studies, looking at both history and civics and geography and economics from a world and a US aspect. So students, instead of just studying World War I from the United States perspective, look at it from a world perspective as well, because after the scientific revolution, we become a more global world, and the United States fits into that global world. So we look at it together. And then 8th grade is citizenship and civic engagement, bringing it all to the top. And then, am I doing vertical articulation as well? Yes. So vertical articulation. So let's take an example of how it articulates from the K2 band all the way to high school. And we picked 2 anchor standards to show you. So in anchor standard 1, we're looking at chronological reasoning, and we're looking at change and continuity over time, similarities and differences between historical periods, past and present. So in 1st grade, students are going to put important life events in chronological order on a timeline. In 3rd grade, students are going to create and use a chronological sequence of events to compare developments that happened at the same time. And they'll be doing that in reference to Arizona. 7th grade, then they're going to look at broader developments, and in 8th grade, they're going to look at how these events were shaped by unique circumstances. Anchor standard G1 is geographic representation and tools, help students understand their world. So in 1st grade, they're going to use and construct maps and other geographical representations of familiar and unfamiliar places, locating physical and human features. In 3rd grade, they're going to use and construct maps and graphs to represent changes in Arizona over time. So you're kind of looking at the chronological reasoning, that idea of change over time, and you're using a geographic construct, maybe a map or a graph, to represent it. And then it gets more complex in 7th grade, where they're explaining cultural and spatial patterns and environmental characteristics with these maps and tools. And in high school, they're explaining and analyzing relationships based upon these geographical representations.
So when we think of, oh,
go ahead. No, that's you, isn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So when we think of this, Arizona 3rd grade really is the start of our grade band for 3-5. And so we want to focus on that for today. So when we look at it for 3rd grade standards, over here on the left are the course considerations or storylines, what Tammy had said, they're broad. So it's things like the contributions of the various cultural and ethnic groups of our 22 Indian nations, economic, political, and geographic elements, structures of state and local governments, roles and responsibilities of citizens, primary and secondary sources, looking at current events and artifacts, as well as our disciplinary skills, looking at things like change and continuity, multiple perspectives. And so those are the broad things. And so these ideas, these course considerations or storylines can really be adapted in any kind of unit. And like Tammy had mentioned earlier, we want to remove that barrier of putting things and blocking things. So really think of creating and developing units where you're doing ELA and social studies and science all in one, rather than, okay, we're putting away the reading book and now we're taking out some social studies. So for 3rd grade, our disciplinary skills and processes The ideas in the grade specific standards look at chronological reasoning, multiple perspectives. For civics, we're looking at civic virtues, Arizona government and civil discourse. We're looking at maps and human environment and interaction, as well as movement and people and changes to Arizona. We also want to look at Arizona's historical narrative over time, and that's where a great way where you can get into those primary and secondary sources. Arizona shaping its history, as well as some of the economics, things like the industries and occupations in Arizona, incentives, scarcity, all of that. So how does it work together? You put it together where you take your course considerations are that content focus, and then you add and apply the standards using those content focus to that. So for example, what does that exactly mean for you in your classrooms? When you look at, say, the standard of disciplinary skill and processes 3, SP 4.2 is to summarize the central claim in a secondary source. It's very easy to change that into a I can statement, where it's like, I can find the main idea in a text about a historical person of event. And this is great because it also ties to ELA. Same thing with SP5, generate questions about multiple historical sources. I can ask questions about a picture. And so this gives students a really good idea of how the standards relate to what they are doing. And using I can statements can be a great rubric going forward as you kind of create your units. So real quick, we just wanted to show and highlight some of the anchor standard similarities between ELA and social studies. And I'm not going to read these, but essentially you can see that they're really, and we did this on purpose and meaningful, that we wrote the social studies standards to mirror and pair with ELA. So while you are creating and evaluating an argument in social studies, you're doing the exact same thing and almost the exact same wording in ELA. And you're determining the main idea. You also are doing that in ELA, comprehending text, interpreting phrases, evaluating multiple forms of media. You're doing the same thing with diverse media in ELA. For writing, social studies requires that you make an argument, you tell a story, use technology, and gather multiple sources, where ELA also asks you to write an argument, write narratives, using technology to produce and publish, as well as using multiple sources. And then lastly, communicating standards. You collaborate with diverse partners in social studies, design and deliver presentations, presenting information using multiple modes of communication, and ELA asks you to do the exact same thing. You're evaluating point of view, design and delivering point of view as well. So, and in fact, we're going to get to some great references on Native Americans here because we've been going over the standards. So real quick, and I don't want to spend a lot of time on this because I do want to get to our resources that we have for you guys, because it is that struggle of how do you do social studies and ELA together. So I want to show you lessons in which to do that. So what are some consistent threads that you guys see in the chat? Yeah, so if you have a set curriculum with ELA, that's one of the things we want to talk about is how do you bring in social studies lessons into that.
We have a training that we do. Sorry, Linda. We have a training that you can take later that also lets you use your reading program and show how to do this.
Mm-hmm. Because they are similar. Yep. Evidence-based reasoning, consistency. Yep. And so the thing when you're doing your ELA standards, you can also do the social studies standards. And we'll show you also too, where we've created a crosswalk where you can look and see, okay, we're doing these ELA standards. We're also doing these social studies standards as well. So a great way to do it is using those informational texts in social studies to teach and use ELA as well. And that's something that we really highly encourage. All right, we're going to go on because I do want to get to kind of the meat of this, of how inquiry is used in social studies. So now I'm going to turn it back over to Tammy. Tammy, you're muted.
Sorry about that. Our standards are based on the idea of inquiry, where students examine questions. They come up with answers to these questions using multiple sources and communicate their conclusions. So our old standards were a bunch of facts, and they're really low on Bloom's and the DK knowledge standards. But our new standards build on the facts. They look at a larger picture. So let's take example of Hohokam canals provided native agriculture water. So if we look at a topic like the Hohokam and their canal system, in the old standards, we might have seen a few facts. In the new standards, we can use questions, which is much deeper, like how did the canals impact the lives of natives? Did the canals provide a means of trade and transportation? What technological advances were needed to provide water? Do the canals link the Hohokam to other Native Americans? Do canals today mirror those of the Hohokam? Are there other places in Arizona where canals were used? Is water the most important resource in Arizona? Great connection to science. And what other technical advances did the Hohokam create to live in the desert, which you can also apply to today, how we changed our landscape and environment so we can also live in this desert, which we are really reminded of today with the temperatures. So moving on to the next, is what we want to show you how to use inquiry very simply in a short little lesson using primary sources from the Library of Congress and their observe, reflect, and wonder strategy. So next slide. So the observe, reflect, and wonder strategy is where you take a primary source and you take students through a series of 3 questions to get them to develop some connections with it. So the first part is always an observe, and you have them look at the source and they have to observe what do they see, not what do they think, but what do they see. And you can do that many different ways. You can have them circle things. You can have them, you can say, what do you see first? So you're going to take them through maybe some guided questions. And are we going to use the Jamboard on this or the chat? You're muted.
Just the
Linda.
chat.
Okay, so in the chat, take a second to write, what do you see? What do you see when you look at this picture? Okay, children, maybe not smiling, a group of people standing outside a building, they're not smiling. And I would ask students, student wrote sadness, I'd say, well, what makes you say they're sad? And they might say they're not smiling the way they look with their children or their shoulders hunched. Native American children, the clothing looks so old fashioned, it looks posed maybe. Different types of clothing. So you take a few minutes, you can do this as a whole class, you can do it as partner share, and you ask them observation questions about the source. It can be a picture, it can be a document, it can be a diary. Then you you move from the observe to the reflect. And the question I'm going to use for this question is, what is going on in this picture? What do you think is going on in this picture? And I'll always tell students, be ready to tell me why you think this is true. So in the chat, what is going on in this picture and why? They're posing. Well, what makes you say they're posing would be a question I would ask. Okay. They're wearing clothing they normally wouldn't. Okay. It looks like a class photo. It looks like they might be being forced to pose. And then I, of course, would ask students, well, why do you think they're being forced? And students with this picture usually say, well, they're not smiling. You know, when we pose for class pictures, we smile. They look very serious. They're grouped, maybe a family. Okay. So you take them through this process and you really take time with them. And then the next question you ask them is, what do you still wonder about, or what questions do you have? So then they can facilitate a group of questions that they wonder about, which can lead to new inquiries. So take just a minute to put down maybe something, a question you might have about this photo. And sometimes I say, if you could ask these children something, what would you ask them? Where are they? Good. What's going on? Why aren't they smiling? Do they want to be there? What are they doing? Are they upset? Excellent. And then as we look at this type of lesson, taking students through this little lesson, which can be an intro into maybe a book or an article that you're reading. It can be an intro into your social studies information if you're going to talk about maybe the boarding schools. As you do a lesson like this, think about maybe how many standards were used in this lesson. So how many standards might have been used in this lesson? So take a guess. So if you go to the Jamboard, the second page, there's a bunch of dots, and I assume they can drag the dots.
Yeah, so you can just take a dot and drag it over. I will, let me do this here. I'll copy it again and put this into the chat.
So just take a guess. How many of our social studies standards were used in this short little inquiry that you can do with students?
And we will include in the resources, the Library of Congress and the National Archives also have great worksheets for all different kinds of primary sources. So like if you do an oral story or a political cartoon or maybe a map, it gives you questions that you can prompt. If you're feeling a little nervous about doing observe, reflect, wonder, that it will help you get kind of those juices flowing for the kids and get them answering.
Okay, so we are all over. So let's go ahead and see actually how many standards were used.
Yes. So here we go.
Okay, so these were all standards addressed by the observe, reflect, and question technique that you can do with your students in 15 minutes or so, or even 20, and 14 standards. And these are just the social studies standards that were used. 9 of them were skills and process standards.
No, 9 of them are ELA.
Oh, 9 of them are ELA
so
standards.
Even though
well.
we did 14 social studies standards, just by doing this one single activity, which could introduce a unit or something like that, you also just covered 9 ELA standards by doing this one quick little activity. So that's one thing that we wanted to, address, is this idea that while you are doing social studies, you are also teaching reading and doing ELA activities. And so that helps eliminate, that you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone, that helps free up some of that time for you. Another inquiry we're going to go into are through the C3, which this was a grant that started from the National Endowment for the Humanities and for the state of New York. And then other states have added and contributed to it. And so we really recommend going out there and looking at these, but look by subject matter, not by grade level. And the nice thing about these is that they are OER resources, meaning they're open education resources. You can change them, mash them, adjust them to whatever you need, and it doesn't matter as far as copyright goes. And so, for example, I'm going to take you through this one here and show you. It's a New York one that started with, why does New York have a state snack? So I changed it to be 3rd grade, which, why does Arizona have a state drink? A couple of years ago, a student petitioned the legislature, and we now have an official state drink, which is lemonade for citrus. And so this is what the format looks like. And it starts always with an overarching brainstorming kind of question, which would be why, you start there staging the question. Then you have supporting questions underneath it with formative tasks. And so these are kind of a scaffold that help the student answer that big overarching compelling question. Then you have a summative performance at the end, which you have the kids do. And then a nice thing is it always has something where you can take action and move it forward. So in this case, staging the question, and we're running out of time, so I'm going to go quickly through this, but like Tammy had mentioned earlier, you will get all of these resources at the end. So you might want to ask your students to brainstorm reasons why Arizona would need an official state drink. Why on earth would we have this to begin with? And so again, you can bring in all sorts of different things like science and the 5 C's and all that into it. And so after you have kids brainstorm reasons why we would need official state drink, here are the supporting questions. And the C3 typically have anywhere between 3 and 4 supporting questions that really help you analyze and answer that final question. So in this case, supporting question number 1 is, where does our government get their power? And in this case, you have an excerpt from the US Constitution and you, which is nice. All the C3 have excerpted things down. And then the preamble for the Constitution. So in this case, the New York inquiry fits perfectly. We can do the same thing for Arizona. And then the formative task would be to have the students write a paragraph that addresses that supporting question, right? Where does our government get power? You could have them do this in small groups. You could have them do this with like sentence starters if you need to, so you can differentiate and adjust it otherwise. Then you can have students do supporting question number 2, which is, why do we need government? So in this case, we have what do governments do chart, which is the same. And in the New York inquiry, we have an excerpt from New York City's 2002 Smoke-Free Act. Well, I just did a quick search online and I found Arizona's Smoke-Free Act here. So you can use the exact same wording, but now make it for Arizona and then do the supporting question where they can discuss with a partner, why do we need a government? Then getting to supporting question number 3, how is our government organized? We have 3 branches of government, which again, this applies to ours. And then you do an excerpt from the branches of government in New York State. Well, I found from the Capitol Museum, which Jordan's going to be on later, a resource where they've got this great infographic on Arizona's branches of government. So using that instead of the New York one, you then have the kids complete a graphic organizer comparing the federal government to Arizona state government. How are they similar? How are they different? And then lastly, we have supporting question number 4, which is, how can citizens influence government? There's a step inside the voting booth graphic, which you can still use. There's a yogurt snack video, and then a yogurt article on Cuomo signing this. And so I found a KTAR news article on Governor Ducey signing the act into law. And so you can use that instead. And you have students write, say, an editorial for a newspaper for or against the idea that citizens should influence government. So again, it's not necessarily that there's a right or wrong answer. Why does Arizona have a state drink? And the kids get to decide this, right? And it should prompt the kids to come up with more questions. And you then can do that summative task where we've got, having the kids maybe take action for something that they want to see happen in their community or their city or their state kind of thing. And so just out of a guess, I'll have you type it in the chat. How many standards do you think were covered with this inquiry? And while you guys are typing in a number into the chat, the nice thing about these, you can do all of this inquiry or you can just do part of it. It really is up to you. And the fact that they are open education resources leaves it wide open. So let's see, we've got anywhere 20s, in the teens. Okay, good guesses. And in this case, we had 12 inquiries that were used. And if you notice, some of the inquiries are exactly the same. And that gets to that Sam Weinberg quote that Tammy mentioned, where we use these over and over again. And with each pass, the kids delve deeper and get better at it. So you're going to be using these standards multiple times, doing it over and over again. And we use 12 social studies standards. For ELA, we used 11 of the ELA standards just by doing this one inquiry. So again, by combining ELA and social studies and using social studies to teach those informational texts in ELA, you're killing 2 birds with 1 stone. It cuts down on that time issue of how to incorporate that. And with your reading scores, your reading things, you can fit in primary sources like the picture for Observe, Reflect, Wonder that Tammy did with it. And so as far as the C3 goes, I have a link here of all of the ones that I felt applied to our 3rd grade standards. Some of them you may have to adapt, like I did for Lemonade, adapt it for Arizona, but there are all sorts of great standards here. And I also provided a link here to the Georgia Department of Education, where they have some really nice clips of how students have examples of using inquiry in their classrooms. And so that's something that you can check out when you get this folder. And now I'm going to turn it over to Tammy to talk about History's Mysteries.
Okay, another resource that we love that uses a lot of primary sources, secondary sources, and inquiry is History's Mysteries, which was created by the Library of Congress for elementary teachers. So each grade level, they have mysteries where students, they do the work of historians and they go through some various tasks. So there's an introduction inquiry that students would start with about what historians do. So they learn how to do a process. And then some of the ones for third grade that we thought would really apply would be, how do maps help us understand the world? And that really hits those geography standards. And then unit 2, how does water shape our lives? Which really talks about the importance of water from a both world and US standard. And then you can apply Arizona, and you might be able then to bring into a unit the Hohokam and canals and the importance of water that way. So there's a lot of these History's Mysteries, and they have them for grades kindergarten all the way through grade 5, and they add to them consistently. And these are really great sources, and they're mysteries. So you could do the first mystery, how do maps shape about how we think about the world? And that might be part of a class lesson. And then you could maybe that's all you want to do for that mystery, or you can do all 4 of the mysteries. They're all self-contained little activities for students to do, which highlight your grade level standards and the anchor standards. We also, because there's a lot of teaching about our Indigenous communities in third grade. One of the sources that is really excellent is called Native Knowledge 360. It's from the Smithsonian American Indian History Museum. And these are some linked lessons that would that are appropriate for third grade that would work well with the standards, especially because they talk, we have standards on our Dana, our Navajo, and this goes into some aspects of some treaties, the first Thanksgiving, and then there's a really interesting lesson on Native American dolls. And the Navajo Treaty of 1868, the inquiry question is, why was the Navajo journey home so remarkable? So really getting students to use inquiry on that.
Real quick, if I can interject, the Navajo
Yes.
Treaty one is actually made for 6th grade, but it is something that can be edited down and excerpted down to make it more appropriate for 3rd grade, because it really doesn't fit in with our 6th grade standards. And again, these are open education resources, so you can take what you need to, you can mash it up, you can combine it, you can use a piece of it, you can use all of it, but they're nice to have.
And you can use the readings as read alouds. There's also other Native American resources that are really excellent. 7th Generation Games is free games that students can do, and they've worked with tribes across the United States, including the Navajo, to create a game that students can play and learn about culture and families, and it's all very culturally appropriate and was done with cooperation with tribal leaders. There's Native American children's literature, and there's a link to that. And then there's tips for teachers, and this is really important, I think, because sometimes we worry when we teach about other cultures. We want to be culturally appropriate. We worry about the words we use, and this website is amazing, and it's tips for teachers, and it goes into a lot of really great pieces of advice and information about all the different types of questions you might have as you're teaching about Native peoples. And then go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, I was gonna say, so we also have some museum resources from the Heard Museum locally. These are a couple of their lessons here. If you click on this link, when you get the resources, it takes you out to there. Again, you can take it and use what you need to. They have the Indian boarding school exhibit, which is really interesting to talk about kids in school and how they were forced to go to school outside of their home communities. But what I also like too are these connecting community videos, where they have videos now online of a bunch of different elders that are telling their stories. And so these would be great to use some of those observe, reflect, wonder worksheets, but you do it with an oral history. And so we'll send out those links to that later. And so that's another local kind of resource to use for bringing in some of the Native American examples that way.
They also have sorry, Linda, the HERD also has a traveling exhibit you can check out on the boarding schools. And it's 5 big, 5 big poster size displays that you can check out and use with your students.
The Heritage Square Museum in downtown Phoenix also has a bunch of exhibits online that you can use what Tammy did, the Observe, Reflect, and Wonder, where they've got pictures and images from what was inside the Rosin House. If you can't get to Phoenix to travel there, it's great to show what life was like in Arizona in the early 1900s. And so you can do all sorts of these images with your kids and do that same activity that Tammy did with the school picture from the boarding school. You can do those here, and they have different lessons as well on their educator website, which is a good resource to have. A couple more to think about is the Arizona Digital History Hub. And Jordan will talk a little bit about this later with the local museums that they have all of these collections online. And I also wanted to highlight too, that as you go out and travel over summer, as you go visit places like say Walnut Canyon up by Flagstaff, or maybe you're out by Tuzagoot or taking pictures in Jerome, or maybe you're down south in Tucson. You know, as you go, use these pictures and use different things that you have from your own things and use them as, you know, sources that you can do observe, reflect, and wonder with your kids, or bring them in to introduce your lessons or units to your students with history. There also are the Arizona Farm Bureau has curriculum kits, and these are great because it can combine social studies, science standards, and ELA all in one, depending on what you want to do. And so bring in some of that history lesson, and those curriculum kits are another place to go where you can find things. And then we just have a couple of things as well. The notable books for 3rd grade. This is where the National Council for Social Studies, along with the Children's Council, have come up, and they do a notable books list every year of trade books that are great, like Tammy said, to do read alouds. So this is a great way to introduce a unit. You can do a read aloud with them. They have all different kinds of books, and you can go back and look at past lists to find different books. If say you want to purchase books for your classroom, or maybe your school librarian is like, hey, I've got this money, you know, what do you want to buy for your grade level? You can get with other grade levels, and they've got a great book. And so this is hyperlinked out here for you as well. And then lastly, we're just going to talk about the social studies in an already packed classroom. So hopefully you've gotten the idea that you do need to combine social studies and ELA, and that's probably the best way in which to kill 2 birds with 1 stone and to maximize your time where you're incorporating social studies and ELA at the same one. With regards to your reading standards, we really suggest taking some time and seeing where your current reading levels bring in social studies already, and where they don't, fill in those gaps with other lessons. And so you can bring in lessons from, say, Econ EdLink is a great place to get some econ lessons, and we'll include that with the resources that I send out to you guys. And then obviously using primary sources as your informational text from social studies. So things like ReadWorks, Newsela, the Library of Congress. This will lead you to primary source sets that are already geared for social studies, and you can use those to do that and then bring in inquiries for you. And so with that, I think we're going to turn the time over. I'm going to stop sharing, and we'll turn the time over to Heather, and she is going to go ahead and start with Asga. Do we want to give people just a real quick, like 5-minute break to run to the restroom, get a drink?
I think that would be wise.
So so it's 10:04 right now. So let's start at 10:09 on the dot. So quick run, go grab yourself a quick drink, run to the restroom, and we will start here in a minute. I'm going to pause.
Perfect. Alrighty, so thank you ADE for some great resources. I'm here to show you a few lesson plans that I'm hopeful that you can take directly back to your classroom, whether you're teaching summer school or whether you're planning for the next school year. As I mentioned at the very beginning, my name is Heather Mall. I'm the co-coordinator of the Arizona Geographic Alliance. Linda, you said that the polls are not working, correct?
You know what? I added your poll. So
Okay.
yeah, we're good. The poll that
All
I
right.
had initially didn't work, but yeah, I'll start. Go ahead and start that now.
Perfect. So if you could take a moment and answer this quick poll, that would be fabulous.
Now it looks like a lot of people are going to be excited about all of the ASGA lessons.
That's great to see. I'm kind of surprised. I like the one first time teaching third grade. We have about 37 new teachers, or 37% of you guys are going to be new to teaching third grade. And the returning veterans, we got some of you in here as well. So awesome. I appreciate you taking the time to do that poll. Our organization is something that was developed by National Geographic years ago, that they wanted to put more geography into all the curriculum out there, whether it be art, whether it be math, whether it be regular social studies classroom, and even ELA. So what has happened over the years is the Arizona Geographic Alliance has developed, we have about 450 lessons, K-12 on our website that allow you to take the standards that you saw in the last hour and implement them throughout your classroom. You need a lesson that has some art in it, here you go. You need a lesson that has some math, here you go as well. But in addition to teaching that art and math, you're going to teach some geography. And it's very important, especially in this day and age, to have students that are spatially aware. Geography is not just looking at maps. Geography is much, much more than just that, oh, let's look at where Arizona is on a map. So what I'm hopeful in the next 45 minutes is I'm going to show you about 6 or 7 lessons that you can take back to your classroom. So the very first one I'm going to show you is our, if I could say, our dessert one, the one that everybody loves, everybody uses, and it can be used multiple times throughout the course of the year. Gail Ekus is the author of this lesson, and she was actually the past coordinator that retired about 2 years ago. And this one is called Toads or Dog's Tails, depending on what grade level you want to use it for. To use it for the little kids, we've shortened the acronym that allows us to have them explore a map. So I know I did say that geography is a lot more than maps, but if you start the kiddos out looking and exploring those maps, they can then take it even further and then become spatially aware. So Toads is an introduction to map reading. And what it does is it takes this acronym of Toads and explains the main parts of a map. And so throughout the course of the year, whenever you use a map, you can reinforce the important parts of that map. So here's what you're going to do in this lesson. You're going to divide the students into pairs. Each pair is going to receive a map and a set of Toads labels. All of these lessons I'm showing you today are on our website, and I'll show you that link. And in that website, any of the worksheets, any of the instructions, any of even these little labels are all there for you to use. They're all PDF'd. You can print them off, have, parent workers or helpers create them, or if you're doing it digitally, you can integrate them into your Google Classroom and have them annotate a PDF of a map or whatever you would then need. So what you do is you have them use these little arrows on any type of map that you have and have them identify that title, the author. And when they work together, they can then, find oh, I found it over here. And it's pretty cool to see when you get all the kiddos doing it. What's like about this is you don't have to have the class do all the same map. If you'd like to start them that way, you can. Or you can have them do a different. So if you're on vacation this summer and you go to the Grand Canyon, you can get the map of at their visitor center. If you are a member of AAA and they still have some of their maps, you can use those. When you come to our conference in September, which more information will be sent out later, you can get some maps from us. We always distribute some maps during that. So there's lots of ways to get your hands on certain maps, allowing for you to use these in your classroom. You can also, we have tons of maps on our website. You can use those as well. So if you use the dog's tails, which is a little lengthier, here's what it is. You look for the date on the map. You look for the orientation, so that compass rose, where's north, south, east, and west. The grid, symbols, the title of that map, the author or the cartographer, the index, if it has it. Not all maps have an index, but a lot of those highway maps or the city maps will have those cool indexes on them, and you can talk, and then that can go back up and talk about grid. You got the B3 or, you know, and then you can pull them and say, hey, you guys ever play Battleship? You can talk about those grid systems. The legend and scale. Now, if you, I know you guys are all third grade teachers, but if you go even further, maybe you got some honors kids, you could talk about the situation of the map. What are we talking about? Is this highways? Is this earthquakes? Is this, you know, what is this map about that's giving you that story? So this would be the higher, because you got toads, you just break it down to a couple of the items, or you can use dog's tails. So the products that are going to be completed during this lesson, they're going to evaluate the quality of maps. Some are going to find out, hey, there's not a title. Why is there not a title? That's very important. And then they're going to, if they want to, they can create their own maps. They can look at other things. So if you want further explanation or want to, you know, see Gail, there is, and you'll get this link as well, a YouTube video of her explaining this lesson. But it can be used all throughout the year. And it shows a lot of good things about, you know, how to interpret that graph you're looking at, how to, you know, what do we need on there so everybody can understand what I'm trying to say on my map. All right, so if you would, in the chat, let me know what you think. Is this something that you could, you know, pull to your classroom, something you would start the beginning of the year with, some fun activity? What do you guys think? Ooh, I like guesses. Thank you. Good to see. I love this one. It's a very fun lesson. Gets the kiddos, you know, talking in groups. Very easy to use. Perfect. All right. Okay, next lesson involves a book called Alejandro's Gift. It's a adorable story, and there is a YouTube video here of this gentleman reading it. So I know not all of you are able to get the book. The book can be in your library, inexpensive. It's an older book, but it's a wonderful story about the gift of water and being lonely, and a lot of that understanding. So I'm going to play a little bit of it here for you. So let me make sure my sound is shared. Oh, I love that somebody's already used this lesson. That's awesome. I'm going to jump ahead.
During the story. Alejandro's Gift. Alejandro's small adobe house stood beside a lonely desert road. Beside the house stood a well and a windmill to pump water from the well. Water for Alejandro and for his only companion, a burro, or a donkey. It was a lonely place, and Alejandro welcomed any who stopped by to refresh themselves at the well. But visitors were few, and after they left,
Sorry, it keeps skipping on you.
felt.
So if you go through, you learn the story about he felt lonely after the people would leave after stopping from water. And he goes through and he plants this garden. And then a little squirrel comes along and starts to, you know, explore, and then gets a little water and runs away. And he's like, maybe this is, I'm onto something here. I can look at this and figure it out. And then he builds this wonderful little area for all the animals to come to. But he realizes it's too close. It's too close to his house, and they're scared to come there. And so he tries again. He doesn't give up. He tries again, and he builds one further out that is, you know, away from his house and secured, and it's covered around with shrubberies and brushes. And they start coming, and he's happier. He realized, you know, maybe this wasn't a gift for them, but a gift for me. And so it's a very, very sweet story. And what you do is you introduce the students to that natural resources, that adaptation. I mean, it's looking down at my watch, it's 104 out and it's not even barely 10 o'clock. So we have to talk to the kiddos about what do we do to survive this heat? Why do we make sure that we always have water? What happens if we're in the desert? So this story kind of gives that aspect. And so you can read the book to the students, go through that, discuss it with them. And there is a
Hello, everyone. Today I'm going to be sharing.
So you can brainstorm and then they can talk about, the 5 W's and that 1 H, where you've got who, what, where, when, why. Who is there with Alejandro? What is he doing? Why is he doing that? And how is he doing it? I mean, how is he digging that hole? And why is it taking him so many days? So you have that story. And in the lesson plan, you have a teacher question with answers. So you can have that guide to help you guide the students through that. And then they're going to look at 2 things where they're going to draw a mural for this book kind of as a class. And they're going to look at writing 3 sentences to describe what's happening and kind of do that school newspaper reporting where they're going to report out, what has Alejandro done? It would be a news story, built this, place for animals to come to get water. And they learn that, okay, how do I modify that environment? How do I change that through? So in this lesson plan as well, it comes with a PowerPoint. And that PowerPoint has some graphics to help guide you through those discussions. And it pulls out those vocabulary words that are new for the students. Environment, cherish is a word he uses in the book. Modification, different houses, what it looks like. He modified the land. Natural resources, kind of talk to the students about, what do you see in this photo? Oh, well, how is the water? I mean, of course, unfortunately, our water isn't as high that anymore in the dam, but you have that aspect of, okay, look at the water behind the dam and then in front of it. How are we stopping that water? And then one part of this lesson does have the students as a class create a mural. So you start by putting a base mural using butcher paper, or you project it on the screen, and then the students will add things to the mural, what they've learned from the story. Okay, what animals were there? What was he planting in his garden? And they get that interaction where, part of your classroom, part of your board is all in detail about that book, about what the story is. So products that you're going to complete, they're going to refer the details in the story. They're going to write informational text and demonstrate a good conversations, use new vocabulary, and describe how us humans, modify the physical environment. All right, same question as last time. Would you use this in your classroom? If you get a hold of the book. If not, you could use the YouTube video. Wonderful. Don't be shy. You can say no. It's not going to be the end of the world. But I love that I see lots of yeses. Thank you, Carrie. I do. The mural is great to see the kids all join in together. I have a few degrees from Arizona State University, and I always love the one wall there that is the chalk wall. And I always walk by it because it changes. It's so much. Yes, thank you, Jamie. The book is on sale on Amazon for $6.99. Maybe you can get a coupon for Prime Day. That would be awesome. Perfect. Okay, the next one I'm going to show you is called The Year at the Ranch. Okay. The Year at the Ranch is an adorable book. And I wish Gail was here to show this to you, because Gail is from Yuma and this book is about Yuma. And it's the sweetest little story of going somewhere new, looking at how the students who used to live in a house that has a toilet are suddenly in a homestead that doesn't have a toilet. They have an outhouse, and that experience of moving and changing and migrating, right? I noticed in chat, somebody said they have to modify it. That's perfect. That's what we hope you do with our lessons, is you take and modify them for what you need in your classroom. So please enjoy. So Year of the Ranch, there is no YouTube video on this. Maybe I'll have to make one. But the book basically starts with this family coming in 1919 to a homestead. If you remember that, usually they would work it out where if you lived on the homestead and you made it workable, after about 3 or 4 years, it would be yours free of charge. That land would become yours. And so the story takes you with this family that comes out to this homestead. It is basically just pieces of wood taped together. And, you know, the daughters are like, really? This is what we're doing? Really? It's an outhouse. It's not a real toilet. And so they have this experience. Dad still, you know, is working in the city and he has to go in. You know, suit and tie is not really that attire that you're looking at to work on a farm, working to, you know, making sure everything's good. And, you know, got water pumping from a well. And so it goes through and talks about a story that, you know, what are the kiddos doing here in this part, this picture you see is there's, you know, scorpions and tarantulas and spiders that are coming in these windows. And what are they doing? So mom's like, okay, on the count of 3, we're going to, you know, smash it with the 2 irons and all this different aspect. So it's, you know, learning to live with what's out there in that aspect. Those winter storms, or not winter storms, sorry, the wind storms that come through. Right? They got to get the tarps down. They can pull the string that, you know, batten down the hatch, as you say, and those dust storms. We're looking at a monsoon season coming upon Arizona here shortly. You know, be careful in those dust storms. So they learn, you know, what do they got to do? And I love the part of the story where it's from the children's perspective. Okay, mom's cooking dinner, but mom's humming, not singing. Mom isn't happy when she hums. Mom's only happy when she's singing. So we got to be good. We got to be careful. And you got a story even of the eldest daughter doesn't want to bring any of her friends by because she doesn't like to show where she lives. But the younger daughter's like, they'll always love to come. They're always here. So it's that story of living a year on the ranch. And it ends where you expect, you think the story would end where, you know, everybody lives happily ever after. But they actually, you learn that they moved away. You know, they sold that land to their neighbor that was helping them. And then this is a picture of later where that area, that land is now, Yuma is one of the highest agricultural areas ever. It's amazing to go down there and see how much farm is out there. So this is a story you go through the students and they get to see, you know, again, modifying and looking at, you know, irrigation and those patchwork quilts and how did they survive and what did they do? So they're going to look at map skills, looking at where Yuma is. They're going to acquire that new vocab. They're going to identify character traits. You know, you had the one daughter that loved it there, that was excited and, you know, let's keep doing this. One of them's like, can we go home yet? I want to go back to the city. I don't do that. And you could, you know, even address in your classroom. Do you have some students that have always lived in a big city or students that have come from, you know, out in the rural areas? For those of you that have students that have never, you know, talked about migration or never looked at anything, there's some videos. This is actually Canadian geese, that whole migration where it's like, oh my God, they're coming at us, they're flying at us. So here's quick. So there are quite a bit of our lessons that have those ELL adaptations, and they can go and look at that aspect. Sorry about that. And then there's also photos that show migration, right? How we're moving, how we're doing this. Those primary sources that they mentioned, you can have them look at, what do you mean that, you know, they had to, you know, carry water in buckets. Those were the cars they drove. So the kids get to see this historical past that's there for us and learn about, okay, why did we go to Yuma? Well, you got the water, you got the aspect to there. And so what they do is they apply the idea of migration to a move maybe that they've made. Okay? Maybe they've switched houses, or maybe they've switched states or cities. And so there's a guided written example here where they talk about, you know, they migrated to where they go, you know, because they did this, and when I felt this, and I used, and so it makes them reflect back on, you know, why did we move here? How did we move here? And if you don't have anybody that, you know, had moved there, you can always have them, you know, tell a story of their family and that movement. So what do you think? I see a lot of people want this book. That is awesome. Well, I will add here. Here's a good part to add then. I am going to offer 5 door prizes. So 5 of you lucky winners will get some door prizes. And that might even be this book if you are one of those lucky ones. I got to check my inventory and see what I got. Wonderful. Guys are making me want to go back teaching with all this excitement. in a couple of years. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, I'm gonna go on then. Any questions too, as I'm going through? I know I'm going pretty fast, but I've got a couple that I want to show you. Okay, perfect. Next one is monsoon days. They're going to look at the aspect of, monsoon and where it's coming from and why it's there and why is it important to Arizona? Why is it one that, is an aspect that we deal with, we love? Like, I don't know about you, but I keep my fingers crossed that monsoon will give us some rain this year. And I always look outside and I hope, when that gets that goldish hue to the sky, that something's coming down those into the valley. So they're going to look at the map. And again, all these resources on our website, I'm going to show you that, where you can access these maps, where you can access these worksheets and reading guides. So they're going to label the continents where the monsoons occur. And then, of course, we're going to ask them, what is a monsoon? Well, it's a really big storm or rain. And you get those cute answers that you get from your students. And then you're going to read together. You're going to read this little story first about what a monsoon is. And then you go through and you have them read the passage again, color coding and having them identify, why is there winds or flash floods and dust storms, lightning? It's not just rain that is a monsoon. And then, of course, we got another book for you. As I said, we want to give you these books so that you can pull them into your ELA learning. So this is a book that actually is called Hip Hip Hooray, It's Monsoon Day. And I apologize as I try, my background's all weird. But it was actually a book that was given the 2007, it seems like a long time ago, but we'll pretend it's not, Southwest Children's Book Award, and the 2008 AAAS Science Children's Book. It's highly recommended. And unfortunately, again, there is not a YouTube video of the author reading it, but this is a story of her getting interviewed about her book.
Okay, well, even though we're saying our farewells to the summer's monsoon, it'll live on in the pictures that our viewers send us and in other ways.
That's for sure, Martha. We're talking about a Tucson children's author hoping that her latest nonfiction book will actually receive a thunderous response. News 4's Lupita Murillo explains why.
Ronnie Capon Rivera Ashford retired from teaching a year and a half ago. She may have left the classroom, but the 3 decades she spent as a bilingual teacher have never left her.
I think I'm a teacher at heart, and I will continue to teach through my stories. That is my dream.
Ronnie is reading her book about the monsoon to students at Prince Elementary. It's a 42-page book illustrated in watercolor by Sahuarita artist Richard Johnson. The story takes place on June 24th, El Día de San Juan, as Tata, or grandfather, explains the tradition to his grandchildren. She also talks about the dangers of the monsoon.
We decided that it was very important to include in this story information for children to learn about how to stay safe during the monsoon storms, because they can be very dangerous, as we've noticed.
So that's what I really like about this book, is it's not just the story that pulls the students in. You then get to talk about the safety of what to do and not do in monsoons. And as it said, it's a very thick book and has quite a few illustrations. And then in the back, it has a bilingual dictionary or glossary, if you will, because this book is written in both English and Spanish. And there's different versions of it. And it's so sweet to see how she gets to incorporate all of her experience into writing these books. So I'm gonna allow you to watch the rest of that if you'd like, once you get this PowerPoint. But let me go through.
Well,
I'm sorry about the blurriness, those old videos, but the pictures are just glorious. It's a sweet story talking about the importance. I noticed even recently now they've changed it, where it used to be monsoon season started whenever we hit 65 dew point 3 or 4 days in a row, but now they've actually said no, it's on, I think might be June 14th. We've already started our monsoon season, so now they've established a date. So it's kind of that aspect of, oh, it's a monsoon day. Goes through, talks about it. So it's great. Having the kids look at this. And so this story allows them, why is this a celebration? Why is water important? Why are we looking at that aspect? So they look at this and they complete a comprehension worksheet when they're going through the books. They answer those questions. What date is San Juan Day? What is that monsoon importance? And then they color code their answers, just like they did in that initial reading. They now look at their answers and go, let's color code those. Let's compare those. Are we talking about the wind and the water and the floods? And then they get to create a monsoon safety booklet. So exactly like Kimberly says, you could braid science and weather into this, and they can create that safety book about why it's important to be safe in the monsoon. And so the scoring guide helps them look through what they need to have in this book. So it's just 2 pieces of paper stapled together to create, how to stay safe in dust storms, how to look at flash floods, how do they happen, and what are we looking at? And here's your scoring guide. Make sure you got titles, make sure you got pictures to help guide you as you're describing what they're doing. All righty. How many of you would use this one? Wonderful. And I will make sure to show you how to get the links to these lessons so that you're not lost. So you can pull them off now and get them ready to go for the new school year. Or if you're teaching now, you can grab one. Perfect. All right. So our 4th one here we're looking at is called Dams That Tamed Arizona Rivers. So it's hard for the students to understand that there are rivers in Arizona. And I was blessed to have a class called Stupid Things People Do with Weather. It was one of my college classes. And the author of the class, or the professor of the class, wrote a book of all the weird stories. And I always remember the one story was of people who were breaking out of a prison in Florence, thought that they could build a raft and go down a river and get free. And this was back, in the early 1900s. But they didn't realize that, yes, there's a river on the map, but Arizona rivers have no water. It's just a river bed. And I see that I am frozen. Can you guys still hear me okay? Good. I see some faces.
Yeah, we can.
My camera's being a little weird then. So what they do is they look at where those rivers are and those different aspects of it. So they discuss the definition of a desert and how we receive less than 10 inches of rainfall per year. They color those 3 regions of the Arizona, mountain, plateau, and desert, and then they color those rivers blue. And so again, these are some maps that are on our website that we offer, and maps that are going to be in this lesson plan. So they discuss the definition of a flood and why flooding is not good. Here's a reading that they're going to do, this dam information sheet. And they're going to discuss then, looking at that information sheet, they're going to discuss the important dams that are in Arizona. And this is a map that was created that shows not only the year the dam was created, but where the dams are along the Colorado, Salt, and Gila rivers. So the products you're going to get from this lesson plan when you use it, you're going to use multiple maps, as you saw. You see the regional map, you see the dam map, you even have this one, which is the population estimated by the county. And you're going to compare where people in Arizona live to where the rivers are found. Are you living near a river? Was it something that did have water at one point? And then we reflect upon how our environment's going to impact our lives. Do we need to be near that river to get water? Is there aspects coming through? So that reading helps them understand why those dams were created. Alrighty, it was a much shorter one, but if you think you could use some of this or you would like to explore it more, what do you guys think? Lots of yeses. I love it. Perfect. Thank you, guys. I'm excited that you're excited. Awesome. Okay. Got a couple more for you, and then I'll show you our website where you can find all this. So next one I've actually written. It's looking at the government, the level of governments, and identifying those different levels. And so when I mean levels of government, I'm looking at the city, state, and national governments. So you begin your lesson by asking them how they know who's in charge. Okay, how do we know the police department? Is it a city police department? Is it a state? Arizona, we have, Phoenix and Glendale. And, I always laugh because at my orientation at ASU, they actually told us you have to be careful if you call 911. And I said, what do you mean by that? They said, if you call 911 at ASU, you have to tell them if you're on ASU's campus, if you're in ASU building, or you're in Tempe, because all the calls will route either to ASU police or Tempe police. And that's who's going to get there quicker. And so you look at the fire department. Are they from the city? Are they the state? I know a few years ago, we had the ambulances company who switched from, being city led to, how are these aspects working? And so you look at, okay, schools, are they usually city or are they county aspects? So learning about the different levels and what they're in charge of, okay? They distribute this US map. They're going to find their state and write in its name. So they can find Arizona. Then they have them find their city and write in its name. Then they have them circle to the last level is the title of the map that they're looking at is going to be the US. You have those 3 different levels, whether it be, Prescott to Arizona to the US, it all depends. So that's what they're going to start with. Now, I did base this off a book called What Are the Levels of Government? It's kind of hard to find. It's in some libraries because it's one of those resource booklets, but please feel free to have the students resource or you can grab some resources for them on those levels of government. So they look at this book and they look at, what are the duties of these levels? What are the, how many governments are there? I mean, we have 50 states, so there's 50 state governments. How many cities are in Arizona? How many city governments do we have? And so they look through this book, they go through these this reading guide, and they answer those questions. And each one, builds upon, okay, what are the 3 levels? And then what are the duties? And then how big are they? And then they, bonus questions. What other levels can you identify? And so maybe that's federal or world, where you've got the UN and all of that. So you end the class by having the students share with a neighbor 2 things that they learned. What did they learn about their city? What did they learn about that aspect? And so ignore the weird pictures of me since my camera's not working, you can see them there. But this right here is they're going to create what we call jokingly a burrito booklet. And this booklet's going to allow them to show those different levels of government. So if you want to create those booklets ahead of time, you're more than welcome to, or you have your students. But I just put that little note there because sometimes 20 minutes will go by and they're still making their books. But there is you pass back the reading guide and they take that reading guide and they create this burrito book that explains the structure of the governments and what is in each of them. And don't worry, if you don't know how to create a burrito book, I got directions for you in that lesson plan because it took me a while as well. Because I was like, I need a creative way to make a book that you don't need to use staples, but if you want to use staples, feel free to do so. But if you notice on the right hand side, that screen there, it shows you a scoring guide. And this scoring guide you can actually give to the students and help walk them through creating the book. So on page 1 is going to be the title page. It tells them at the top of the paper, write your name and date, write the title of your booklet. And it allows them to walk through where you're looking at the local government on page 2 and 3, the state government, the federal government. And then they can take their map and incorporate it in as well. So the products, you're going to have them looking at that US map. You're going to complete that burrito book, and then you have that answer guide. So as you notice, hopefully all of our lessons come with assessments. Those assessments tie back to the standards. And so if you're ever asked, what standards are you assessing in your classroom? These lessons show you directly that those assessments go right with the standards that are in that lesson. So what do you guys think? Keeping you awake, that's why I keep asking this question. Perfect. Yes, please break up what you need to do. Definitely, definitely. Wonderful. Perfect. Awesome. All righty. Here's my last one I'm going to show you. I want to put a disclaimer on this. This lesson is a very long lesson. And what I mean by that is if you look at this lesson and you automatically look at how long it'll take, it says 10 sessions. Don't be scared. What I mean by that is you can break it up. You don't have to do it, 2 weeks in a row. You can break it up where you do, one every Friday, one once a month. It's all entirely up to you, because what this lesson does is it helps students learn about Arizona. It's a great book called Way Out West and Witty by Conrad Storad. He's a fabulous author and does these great books. And he's a wonderful person to meet if you ever get to go to any of his presentations. He actually goes to schools and gives presentations, and he's got those stuffed animals you see. He's got a story monster that goes with it as well. But students in Arizona need to know some of our distinct characteristics. We always laugh when we get those things on social media that say you're from Arizona when you can like say Gila correctly or know what certain areas are. So the purpose of this lesson is students are going to read the book Arizona Way Out West and Witty and select a community, and they're going to create that Arizona Atlas highlighting human and physical features of that community. And it allows you to explore more than just Phoenix or more than just your city. They get to see, why being the city, not why, but they get to learn all these different cities that exist in Arizona. So as I said, take parts of it as you would like, but they have an anticipatory set that they go through. So they're going to look at these 2 maps of Arizona, and they're going to comment on places that they have visited or places that they know. And then they can review the definitions of human and physical features, humans being those things that are created by man, and physical being by nature, those rivers and the Grand Canyon and all those aspects. Now they're going to look for human and physical features on the landmarks map, and then the physical features. So you can tell the differences between them, and they'll start identifying those 2 different features. Now you're going to give the students this reading guide, and they're going to go through their city, their area, and they're going to look for physical features, and they're going to look for human features. And as they enjoy their book, enjoy that one little blurb about their city, or more if you'd like, they're going to take those notes and start identifying the separate features. So in session 2 through 7, or however you decide to do it in your classroom, they're going to continue reading and completing that student notebook. And at the end of session 7, now, if you want to, you can assign them an area to begin with, or you can just have them explore Arizona. That's entirely up to you. But if you'd like, this part has you give the students draw one of 25 cities that are listed to then do their kind of little report on. And so if you want to add some, you can, get those non-cities that aren't as popular. And then they're going to focus on their selected community for the next few sessions. And then they're going to create kind of their little 3 pages about that city, about that aspect. And then what's really cool is you're going to assemble all those pages from the kiddos, whether you started at the beginning of the year and then at the end, you have this gorgeous atlas from all your kids that are about the different cities in Arizona. So whether you decide, use that for an end of the school project or an school year project or aspect. So they each, will have their 3 pages. Where am I in Arizona? What is my city's name? And then I've got physical and human features. They can add pictures as they go. They can, draw them, or it's entirely up to you as the teacher. But we do these lessons to give you kind of a guide, kind of an aspect you go through, and then you can modify them however it works for your classroom. So here's some just more pages that are in the lesson. You have a note-taking worksheet for the human. If you want to add them, have them do some internet research. What website did they use so they can cite their sources? Maybe they used a book. And then the Atlas scoring guide, those 3 pages, it gives you a scoring guide. So if you want to grade their work. And then on the far right is the physical features. So it looks just the same, but of course the titles are changed. All right, so the products, of course, you're going to get out of this. You're going to describe the communities in Arizona in terms of physical and human features. You're going to gather and summarize research from various sources, including the internet or this book if you'd like. Use correct conventions when writing. So grammar, of course, is important. And then identify those human and physical features. All righty, what do you think? Love it. Thank you, guys. I'm glad you're liking them. I hope that you will take them, but let me show you how to find these, because it's so great that I could sit here, for 40 minutes and tell you all these different aspects. So let me show you where to find these so that you can use them within your classrooms. So as I said, we have a website. This is the website. I'm going to switch my screens here real quick so that I can go to this website. Stop sharing. I'm wondering if my camera is going to behave. Can I say hi to you all, or I'm just sitting without video? Without video works. I'm sorry, guys. You'll just have to stare at my picture. My bad. So looking at our website, I'm going to put it in chat as well so that you're more than welcome. Oh, Linda, you're amazing. Thank
Do
you.
you want me to show them my screen?
I should be able to share it. With sharing,
Oh, okay.
fine, right?
Yeah,
I
yes,
think
it
my
was.
camera just says it's had enough of Zoom calls.
There you go.
Does it every once in a while. I apologize. So here, do you see our website? I don't see my, it's not sharing. You don't see our website because, let's try again. There we go.
Here we go.
So this is our website. And in this website, there's two things that I want to show you to begin with. First and foremost, any of the lessons I just did for you, if you go to this search button over here and you type in any part of, as you can see my search here, any part, like if I do hip hip, that's not gonna work. Gotta do probably 2 or 3 words, or it doesn't like your search, or even monsoon should work. You have all these different aspects. So this is the map that was used in the monsoon lesson. And that searches will, I promise you it's there. But those searches will help you. I think it was monsoon day that will work. Will bring you to our lesson plans. Now, granted, you can look through all the different lessons, but this is what our lessons plans look like, with the description and then the teacher instructions. So everything I had on that slide has the standards that are addressed, and we are happy to say that our standards have been updated to all of the new ADE required standards, the most recent ones. So they're all updated. And the materials are here, the procedures, everything that you would need to do this lesson plan. It shows you the assessments. Right? The booklet's worth 35 points. This is the score, hopefully you're looking at. Here's your different sessions. Here's some sources as well. Some videos that you could show, kind of some other aspects to it. Also, if you look at the page, you have your student worksheets. So these are the sheets that I was telling you about, that if I showed you any of those, here's that monsoon reading. Okay, here's some other charts that show you about, what is a monsoon, what is lightning. So you can even just take these PDFs and download them. And if you're still, have students that are online, you can move those, then assign them to their Google Classrooms or assign them to whatever format you guys use. But these are all PDFs, right? And it helps those aspects. But what I really want to also show you is, despite all the ones that we have here, if you look on our latest news, there's a lesson list by grade level, or here over on the right hand side, lesson list by grade level. There's 2 ways to get to it. And if you click on lesson list by grade level, what we've done is we figured, we could search by grade level, but sometimes I really need to know about a lesson for a certain standard. So if I click on my 3rd grade here, these are all the lessons based on the standards. So taking the standards in a broad term, we didn't narrow it down very narrow, But if we look here, 3G1-1, use and constructs maps and graphs represent changes in Arizona over time. Of course, we took the geography standards out of the social studies standards. But if you want to touch on that standard, all 25 of these lessons have that standard in it, and they are hyperlinked. So if you're looking through this and go, oh, I really want to learn about fantastic frogs because frogs are awesome. I need a lesson on frogs. I can go here, and here's my lesson on frogs. So these are all by grade level. So maybe you got a friend that teaches 4th grade, or maybe you teach 2 grade levels. But these are all lessons that are hyperlinked from that PDF that show those different. So human environment or interactions. Okay, there's 24 there. Examining human population and movements. Global interconnected and spatial patterns. All of these are there as well. We also have what we call our giant floor map. Has anybody, if you put in the chat, is there anybody that has used our giant floor map or heard of our giant floor map? Ooh, I see a no. I like no's because I get to teach you something new. Yay. Awesome. Well, hopefully next year you can use this. So we have a giant floor map. We have a map of Arizona, and my internet needs to behave. A giant floor map that is 17 feet by 22 feet. So we'll need to go in a library or a gymnasium. But this map is a landscape map of Arizona that looks like this. So it is one that you unfold. And we offer it free to teachers who have had a training. And I will be offering a training very early in the fall. I need to finalize that date. But once you are trained, all you got to do is contact us and reserve the map. And the map has tons of lessons that come with it. For example, it's got dog's tails, and it has the little errors that you can go and, have the kiddos go and find that stuff on the map on the floor. Of course, they get to take their shoes off, so they're so excited by it. We also have a grid lesson that allows them to use chains. One kid stands on one side, one kid stands on another, and you use these chains to create the grid and see it move. There's Simon Says. There's tons and tons of these lessons that go with this map, and it's all in the kit. So if you need a supply for that lesson that's on our giant map, we have that in the kit. And the kit's in kind of like a Rubbermaid container that will actually fit in the back of my car. I have a kind of 4-door small car that it will fit in, so it will fit in most likely. And all we ask is that you pick it up. There is one in Yuma and one in Tucson. We're looking to figure out how to get one up north. So if there's anybody up north on this call that would like to figure that out with me, that would be great. But so we have this giant landscape map, and that's where we take, then if you look over here, this is where all our lessons live. We have the geoliteracy. We have all these lessons, and all you got to do is filter. You can filter by grade level and say, okay, I just need to look at my 3rd grade ones. I know there's a lot and I want to explore, but here's all your 3rd grade lessons that exist out there in just the geoliteracy, which means just they all have a book or a story with them. Then we have some STEM lessons. We have some history lessons. And then I mentioned maps. Since I got just a couple minutes left, you can sit and explore this website. But maps we have a ton of. So maybe you just need a map for one of your lessons that you've created. Maybe you just want a world map at the beginning of the year. All of these, again, are free for you to use. Maybe I just want to show the Northern Hemisphere. They are all Blackline masters. And what I mean by that, they're all PDFs. And when you have a computer that's not being temperamental during a presentation, it will load correctly. I promise you that. But it's a PDF of that map that shows you those different aspects, but you can go by regions. And then because you are the little kids, and I bless you for teaching those little kids, I taught high school. These are grades 1 through 4, and you can actually click on this, which is those human and physical features. So if you go back to that one lesson I talked about, looking at the human and physical features, these are all different aspects. So maybe I want to look at, I'm going to do a black version here. Yes, print anything you like. Share anything you like. All of it is free for teachers. So if you want to use it in your classroom, please, please, please do so. Definitely, all of it is for you to use. Right, so here's where they can identify it. You got your mountain range, you got your plateaus and all those fancy little terms we use. And maybe there's human features we want to look at. Those different blanks. Okay, you got your state, you got your city, right? And they are labeled on the other examples, and some of them are colored, and you have those different aspects that will pop up. Okay, so whatever ends up working for you. Now, Linda did mention, so the very last thing I want to show you, take 30 more seconds. Over here, we have interpreting primary sources. So she mentioned that on the Library of Congress, they have the worksheets that will allow you to add words. So let's say you liked that image that Tammy had showed with the, the kids standing there taking a school picture. And you want to have the kids look at that. So if I go here, these are student worksheets. These are tools that'll help you, and it explains it a little more. But if I look at the image analysis, this is going to bring up a Word document. And in that Word document, it's going to have drop-down menus that's going to show you where I can observe, reflect, and question. Change shares here real quick. And so what you can do on this is you can modify this worksheet. So using that geographic lens where I can click on this and see there's this drop down arrow, I can say, okay, what is the form of the image? Is it a painting, print? Okay, maybe I want them to reflect. So what questions could I use? There's no date. When do you think the image was taken? And here's your answer for the kiddos to write down. And here's the evidence. So again, that is up there free of charge for you. And if you'd like, we are hosting a primary sources webinar next Saturday that'll go a little bit further into these and how to use them and looking at some primary sources with that geographic lens. So if you're interested, that is on our homepage. There's a link on our homepage to sign up on Eventbrite. So questions? I'll stop sharing so I can see chat a little better. What is primary sources? Is that what you're asking, Mary? I think it's Mary. And Vance? I will put the link in so you can sign up. It's primary sources. That's right. I'll put it in chat real quick. The resources we have for curriculum app would just be those lesson lists. You could add them based on what part of the curriculum you're in to teach.
It's definitely something that you don't necessarily, and that's the beautiful thing of the new standards, is you don't have to have a set prescribed curriculum. You can develop lessons as, say, a third grade group of teachers that say you want to touch on these particular themes and ideas, and then really pull lessons from your ELA maybe reading section, pull some lessons from ASGA, pull some lessons from the National Archives, or the C3 teachers, those pictures, and really create lessons where you are combining all the different subjects together rather than doing blocks, which the research is showing that blocking out days is not really conducive to increasing kids' learning. And so definitely pull from a lot of different places. And it does take that time to kind of sift through, but when you do have something like ASGA that's already tied their standards to their lessons, it's fantastic. Real quick, just because, do you have anything else, Heather, before we turn it over to Jordan?
I do not, unless anybody has any questions. I haven't seen any come through, but if you ever need anything, I just put my email in chat if you have any questions. And I also put the link to the training that will be next Saturday for our primary sources.
Fantastic. And with that, I think I will let Jordan go ahead and introduce herself. And you should be able to share your screen, Jordan, as well.
Awesome, thank you. I'm Jordan Cyrus. I am the education coordinator at the Arizona Capitol Museum. I'm sorry I don't have video today, no video on this computer, but I do have a little presentation I will share about the museum. Just give me one quick second to get that up. Okay. So like I said, I'm going to share a little bit about the museum, specifically about the museum's tour program, as well as a virtual field trip that we created in response to the COVID-19 pandemic. While that did serve as a way for us to continue reaching students during the museum's closure, we are going to continue to offer this program moving forward. And also for those of you who are looking for a way to incorporate additional subjects into your social studies lessons like ELA, the virtual field trips, videos, and assignments are a great resource to use nonfiction narratives to bridge those two areas of study. So I will touch on that a little bit more in just a little bit. So to start off, for those of you that are unfamiliar with the museum, the Arizona Capitol Museum is located inside Arizona's historic state capitol building in Phoenix. Construction was completed and the building was dedicated in 1901 as Arizona's territorial capital. When Arizona became a state in 1912, the building became our state capitol. Although due to overcrowding, a number of additions and new buildings were created around the historic capitol. And eventually by 1974, the government had entirely moved out of the original building. And in 1979, the building was officially became a museum dedicated to sharing Arizona's governmental, political, social, and cultural past. A restoration was completed on the building at that in the early 1980s, and it was returned to its original appearance. The museum's tour program was also established in 1979, and it supports Arizona's social studies standards with an emphasis on government and civics. So up on the screen right now are some of the third grade standards covered by our tour program and our virtual field trips. One example of this includes reviewing Arizona's timeline from westward expansion through statehood with the use of maps to demonstrate Arizona's changes over time. Then our virtual field trip. So as I mentioned, this was a way for us to continue to reach students during the last school year. And so in an effort to best serve those educators who have visited the Capitol, we developed this to continue sharing Arizona's history and cultural past. The museum's tour program serves over 20,000 K through 12 students annually, and our virtual field trip has been designed to continue serving those students during a time when in-person field trips may not be possible due to scheduling, transportation, location, any reason you guys might have to not be able to come down and visit us in person. We will still offer this virtual field trip program so that you are still able to use these resources. So our virtual field trip consists of a filmed recording approximately 45 minutes long that follows Arizona's journey from westward expansion through statehood, pre and post tour activities, and an opportunity to interact with a museum educator through either a live Q&A or a digital question form. All components of the virtual field trip are available free of charge through Google Slides. The format allows educators to pick and choose which videos, resources, and activities to use and assign that will best fit your unique lesson plans and classroom needs. All videos, resources, and activities are linked into the Google Slide presentation that will be sent to you as a confirmation of your field trip that you've requested. And then again, this just allows you that flexibility for scheduling and customizing to your needs. So requests to book a virtual field trip are available now. The response time on those is 24 to 48 hours. So I recommend completing your request close to the time you want to utilize your field trip. Otherwise, it might just get lost in your emails. And then the link to book the field trips is on our website. You will also be able to visit our website for updates on the tour program and currently available educator and student resources. We also have an educator guide with more information on the virtual field trip up on our website. And then finally, the museum will be resuming our in-person tour program for the 2021-2022 school year. In-person tours will be available during the majority of the school year, August through May, and the link to request an in-person tour will be up on our website soon. We don't have an exact start date for those yet. We are finalizing a couple of details, and as soon as we have that, we will put that up on the website. I've also included my contact information if you guys have any additional questions or comments. And then that is all I have. So if you guys have more questions right now, I can answer those for you.
Thank you so much, Jordan. Definitely, I know in the chat, like the virtual field trips is a great way that one of the good things that kind of has come out of COVID is, you know, the idea that even if you're not in Phoenix, you can take advantage of these, this great virtual field trip and still get your kids to the Capitol without having, you know, to go through the cost and expense of it. So that is, I think, that has been and will be a great resource to, you know, rural communities and people outside of Maricopa County.
Yeah, absolutely. We were so excited by how we were able to reach beyond Maricopa County in the last year, and our ability to continue to grow this program as the years continue.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Yes. The museum resource. Thank you for putting that in there, Tammy. All right. Anything else before we thank Jordan? Okay.
Looks like Wendy had a question, Linda.
Oh, yeah, let's see. Oh, can we get a virtual field trip now and save the Google slide presentation?
So the Google slide presentation is the field trip itself. I send you that Google slide, and in it contains the virtual field trip videos and links to the activities that I mentioned. And then also your live Q&A if you choose to schedule that. If you don't choose to schedule that, that link to the digital question form, which is just a form you fill out with any questions you or your students have that you would ask a museum educator. And then I email you back those answers. So all of that is in the Google slide presentation. You can use it whenever, it doesn't ever expire. You can watch the videos at one point, do the activities at a different point. You can screen it before you share it with your students, whatever works best for you. We tried to make this as flexible as possible to meet all the different classroom needs that were out there.
Fantastic. Any other questions?
I did see one from M. Vance. She said, sorry, I missed the sign up and can't find it. Which exact sign up are you referring to?
I think she was talking about your primary sources training,
okay,
which I was going to include that in the resources when I send out.
Oh, perfect.
An email. I believe.
Thank you for that. I appreciate you.
Awesome. All right, so we have just a few minutes left. So I'm going to share my screen here again, real quick, just to do some last minute kind of things. So real quick, just as you can see, going again, now that you've seen all those amazing resources that the Geographic Alliance has, and seen what the Capitol Museum has, you've seen some of the C3 lesson, you've seen the Observe, Reflect, Wonder lesson. It's really the idea of starting with your curriculum and your reading series. So look and again, find where you have gaps of where you have different items where you can add things in and fill those gaps as you need to. And don't forget of using social studies to teach those informational texts, which are part of your reading scores. Primary sources are easy to find off the Library of Congress. I'll show you a couple things here. I wanted to, ReadWorks is great because they will adjust the Lexile level for your kiddos. Newsela has some free articles, but it does have a paid service. There are other ones like Docs Teach and things like that. But I wanted to show you real quick here, both the Library of Congress and the National Archive websites. Oops, here, let me put this over here. There we go. So this is what the teacher analysis tool looks like. So whether you are analyzing a map, maybe that you got from ASGA, or maybe you're looking at a photograph of a print, a newspaper, maybe it's a text, they have all of these here where if you click on them, it brings up a PDF that has your Observe, Reflect, and Question, where you start off like what kind of questions to prompt the kids. So it's nice that it gives you this knowledge that you can go through if you're not sure what questions to exactly ask or how to gear this for social studies. It has this here for you to get the who, when, where, what. I do also like the National Archives because of a couple of different reasons. Maybe you teach different levels, or if you have to move up, it's nice that they've taken essentially the same questions that the Library of Congress has, but they have geared it more for emerging readers where it's a little bit more scaffolded. And then they also have it for intermediate or better readers. So you can make those kinds of differentiation. The other thing with the Library of Congress I wanted to show you is they do have, when you go out there and search, let me just show you this. You can search, I mean, it's almost a little overwhelming what you can search for. You can come out to their educator resources here. They have historic sites and stuff, but say you want to search on baseball, you're doing something with sports for your unit. If you come in and you do baseball.loc.gov and then click search, that's going to bring up all of the resources that the library has first and foremost in their collection. And so you can look at those resources and pick images or articles that it may be. Like here's different baseball's greatest hits, all sorts of different items. Here's music that you could do for baseball that they have. So lots of different things that you can search on for the Library of Congress, which is kind of nice. And then the last website I wanted to show you, because I did mention it earlier and I didn't have a slide on it, is Econ EdLink. And so I'm going to put this into the chat for you guys here, because again, economics is something that is now required to be taught K-12. And if you were like me, you never took an econ class in school, and that can be a little intimidating. But the nice thing is we do have local things, like the Arizona Council on Economic Education often does elementary trainings where how to use children's literature with economics. So then again, you're combining that ELA and social studies together. This is another one that you can come out here and you can select on lessons for grades 3 through 5. And what I like is it not only includes lessons, but it includes ways that you can educate yourself. So if there's something you're not sure about, it has plenty of things on how to use, here's how to use Edpuzzle if you're teaching. But you can come out here and search by lesson and click apply for a filter. And what that does is this brings up all of these lessons that are geared just for grades 3 through 5. So here's about prices and pizza. Where did a pencil come from? So you're talking about resources. You can talk about the forests of Arizona and bring in maybe some geographic, like the different regions that Heather had talked about in that one lesson. You've got different things on workers, Minecraft, all sorts of great lessons. And the one thing I like about the Econ EdLink lessons is, like the C3, they have already taken lessons and they've excerpted the primary sources. They give you the handouts that maybe you can make copies on. And so everything is already there for you, and they do it and write down the lessons really in a nice step-by-step format. I've used them myself many times, and they have lots to go on. So this is a great thing that you can bring in. So here is a story, a chair for my mother. So you're bringing ELA and econ together. You can get some different voices in if you're wanting to bring in diversity. So it's a great resource to look at. I also wanted to say that we do have many other types of professional development. We have more of these seminar series going on. We have one on media literacy in a couple of weeks where we still have availability for that. And so all of these are listed on our professional development. If you don't have your phone handy to look up the QR code, you'll get this in your email in a little bit from me. But keep checking it, bookmark it, because I'm constantly adding things that, as Heather puts a training out there, or the Arizona Council on Economic Education, or there's the Thomas Brown Foundation down in Tucson that does some great economic lessons. Anything that we find out, we put these out on the website, and so it's constantly there. And then the last thing I wanted to show you was our ADE webpage, which when I was teaching, I had no idea there was this much stuff out here. So I had sent you here where you've got the lessons, so you can come out here and click 3rd grade lessons. But this is really key for the ELA social studies, and it also has the ELP standards here. So when you're teaching these social studies standards, you are also teaching these reading standards and these ELP standards. It gives you a rationale and also some suggestions too for how to really incorporate the social studies and the ELA together. And so definitely take a look at it. It's also a way that you can justify, hey, I am teaching ELA. If you're getting pressure to teach ELA instead of social studies, this is what you're doing. And this is also why we wanted to include that research that shows more than any other subject area, social studies is going to lead to that background content knowledge that's going to increase reading scores. And the research of getting rid of the reading block and really creating holistic lessons to do that. Suggestions for novel studies that incorporate Arizona standards. I would say really look at the notable books, which I'll go back to in a minute. I wanted to show you, here is our resource page 2 for, you can come resources, here we go, K8, and you click 3rd grade resources or any grade. And here are your course considerations for your content that we have to do. And then here are a whole bunch of lessons of resources that are free or nearly free that you can come out here. And as far as novels go, let's see if I have it here. The notable books. Where do I have it? Oh, here we go, the C3, here we go. So this is the 2019 one. So this is where I would say come to novels and the notable books that I had mentioned before, and you'll get this link also in the resource here. But again, look for things that maybe apply to Arizona. So here the dam is, and even though this is maybe kindergarten, 2nd grade, it would be great to apply for Arizona because we have dams all over Arizona. Or talking about different women. Let's see, here we go. There's 3rd through 5th grade, right? All these different social studies lessons and books that you can get, that you can either add to your classroom library or add to your personal library. And so that's out there on our resource page. And then I also wanted to show you our PD videos. So we will have this webinar recorded so you can come back and reference it. We'll have these out here for you. And then lastly, I wanted to show you our newsletters. So we, every month, with the exception of June and July, I put out a newsletter. And so here was the last one for May, just to show you a little what it looks like. It's got all of the PD that we have available too. It does have articles, it's got student contests, it has resources, it's got little tips and tricks, summer institutes and PD that maybe you're available for. Like here, the geography teacher journal was free until June 1st. If you are interested in signing up for a newsletter and you don't already get it, if you can for me, put your email into the chat and I will add you and you should get your first newsletter come August. And I think that is all I have for you guys today. So I want to thank you so much for coming. Put your email in the chat if you are interested in getting my newsletter. But for attendance purposes, can I please have you type your first and last name into the chat as you registered, so that way I can do attendance. And how this will work is I will give me a couple of days. In fact, I will say I have to leave today to go out of town. So I won't get to it until Monday. But Monday, I will input your attendance into the system. At that point in time, you will get a link that you can submit a survey for. Heather also has a survey for you guys that we can either put it in the chat, and I will also include it in the email that I send to you guys. And at that point in time, once you complete the ADE survey, you can then get online and print the certificate that will give you your PD hours for this 2.5 hours for this seminar. And I think that was it. Also, my email's out there, linda.burrows@azed.gov. If you are having struggles finding novels or finding stories, right, that's what my job is. I teach teachers now. So if you're having trouble locating a resource, if you want me to come out and do more specific training on PDs, on how to find primary sources, how to use primary sources at your school, I'm more than willing to come out and we do both. We haven't started doing on-site trainings yet, but we will soon, but definitely virtually. I can come out, like if you have a half day, or maybe you want to have just your team get together and do this. Yes, I will send this out on Monday. So I'm actually leaving this afternoon because I have to go out of town. But I will get this done and you will get it on Monday. So with that, thank you guys so much for coming. Heather, did you want to put your link in the chat real quick for your survey?
And if you guys need anything from me as well, my email is just heather.mall@asu.edu. And I can do the same things. If you want a giant map training for your school district or whatever, just shoot me an email and I can help out in the geography department, whatever you need.
Wonderful. And thank you guys so much. Enjoy the rest of your day and we will see you later. We appreciate it. I'm going to stop the recording.